Just because a film is short on runtime doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be short on substance. Now, what about the Oscar-nominated short films? Well, let's find out. Intro. Take one. Hey everyone, Steve here. Those of you who watch my videos know that I love movies, and I also really get excited when Oscar season rolls around. It's coming around the corner. The Oscars ceremony is going to be on Sunday, April 25th. And people often ask me why I even care about the Oscars, and I will admit up front that there are things that I do not like about them. I don't like the flashiness. I don't like how it's kind of been a little bit of a political or social thing where people who get the awards are often the people in the club, so to speak. With that being said, I do think that they're going in a better direction than they've gone in before, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But mostly the reason why I actually pay attention to the Oscars is for two reasons. Number one, I love film, and the Oscars are arguably the most important award that a film could get. And number two, I just like peeing. Wow. Number two, I just like seeing people honored for good work. I just really appreciate it when people who actually deserve it are honored for good work. Now, that doesn't always happen with the Oscars, but when it does, it's a really good feeling. And there are a lot of people who agree with me, and there are actually people who are really hardcore into the Oscars, even more than I am. But even within that group of people, there are people who do not really care about three particular categories. And those three particular categories all fall into the short film categories. One thing that I really like about short films in general is that it's in the name. They're short. With a short film, you have a shorter amount of time to get your point across and tell your story. And when a film can do that effectively, it's really cool to see. Starting around 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago anyway, I decided that after the short film nominees were announced, I would try and make a point to see every single short film nominee before the ceremony would actually happen. Because another thing that you often see with short films is that they're not made by the A-listers. They're not usually made by people who have a huge amount of clout in the industry. They're usually made by people who are either kind of secondary parts or are trying to get their foot in the door. And if there's anything that I want to do, it's support the people who are trying to get their foot in the door. And the way that I used to watch the short films was by finding theater showings in which they would be showing these short films. And it was always a fun time. Now, even though these showings are still going on in certain parts of the US, even with the pandemic going on, I'm not going to a theater to watch those during the pandemic because, believe it or not, those showings can get packed. Or at least they did pre-pandemic. That being said, the short films this year anyway were really accessible in terms of finding ways to watch them for relatively low cost. Many were free to watch on YouTube and Vimeo, and one was free to watch on Pluto TV, and there were some that were on pay-to-watch streaming services such as Netflix, but for the most part, they were really easy to watch. The only time I actually had to really pay to watch the films themselves is when I watched them through a bundle that I bought on Prime Video. And this bundle was only $9.99. It didn't have every single film, but it happened to contain the ones that I couldn't watch for free, or at least couldn't easily find ways to watch for free. And because of that, I was able to watch all 15 of the Oscar-nominated short films for the year 2021. Now, they were easy to access, but in terms of them being something that a general audience would like or understand or want to watch, are they accessible in that way? Well, let's dive into it. So I'm going to break the categories down into the three categories, and within each category, as I'm talking about each film that I watched, I'm going to give a really brief rundown of what I thought of it, and 4 of them I'm going to mention in no particular order, but the last one I mention in each category is going to be my favorite. And I'm going to tell you why it's my favorite. The first category we're going to dive into is the best animated short film category. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the first one I watched, which I was able to watch on Disney+. And it's called Burrow. Burrow is a short film about a rabbit who is trying to build a home for herself amongst a bunch of other homes of other animals. And it's just a really sweet film. It's not one that I'm going to remember for years upon years like some of these other films that I'm going to mention, but it was really sweet. And of all of the animated films, this is probably the only one that I would feel okay showing to a child. Burrow is available to stream on Disney Plus, and of all of these, I think it's the shortest. I would have to double check, but I think it's the shortest. And it's just a really cute, sweet film. And another film that was nominated in this category is Yes People, which is available for free to watch on YouTube right now. This is an Icelandic short film about a group of people who live together in an apartment complex. And it all revolves around one joke. But that one joke expands into something that you wouldn't expect. And while I would also say that this film isn't anything unbelievably fantastic, there are parts that are really damn hilarious. And for those of you who are scared of subtitles, let's just say the one joke that we have is one of the reasons why you shouldn't be afraid of that. And another nominee that we have in this category is a French short film called Genius Loci. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not, and I apologize for that, but Genius Loci. And it's a short film about a young woman who lives in an urban area and is bombarded by all of the sights and sounds of this urban area and things that may or may not be in that urban area all at once. This is definitely more of an art house film, but it does have some things that don't make it feel like it's totally inaccessible, and it really is a lot like a painting. I really loved the look of this film. You can find it on Vimeo. It is free to watch. If you're interested in something different that isn't terrible, check it out. Now our next nominee I actually did watch in part of this Amazon Prime bundle I got because I couldn't find it for free anywhere else. It's a South Korean animation called Opera. An opera, I really don't know how to say what it's about because this really is an experimental film. I don't even know what it's trying to say. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that if you want to see a film where you know exactly what it's talking about and you want all the answers given to you, this one's not for you. That being said, if all you're looking for is just some fantastic animation and a really great piece of imagery to look at, then maybe check this one out. But the absolute best of these films, in my opinion, and the one that I do think has the best chance of winning the Oscar, is the Netflix short film, If Anything Happens, I Love You. Let's just say, without giving too much away, that the thing that is at the center of this film is a very hot button issue. And one that most people think that even if we don't know exactly how we do something about it, we've got to do something about it. Seriously, if you have a Netflix subscription, go watch this one. It's worth it. It's going to make you sad and it's going to be soul-crushing, but go watch it. And now we're going to move on to our next category, which is Best Live Action Short Film. And we're going to start with The Letter Room. The Letter Room is another one that's actually available to buy on a lot of different platforms. I ended up just getting it as part of that Amazon Prime bundle. But that aside, Letter Room is about a prison guard who ends up getting a job working in the letter room, where he has to read the mail that comes in and make sure there's no contraband and make sure there's nothing wrong with the material in there. And let's just say that one series of letters he's reading piques his interest. This at its center is a film about loneliness and somebody wanting connection and somebody feeling like they have connection with somebody even when they have no idea what this person is like. And there are moments of sadness that come along with that in this film, but there are moments of happiness, little glimmers of hope as well. This is a good short film. I wouldn't call it anything unbelievably great. I would call it good. I would call it worth watching. Even though if Oscar Isaac's mustache isn't fake, it's the most fake looking real mustache I've ever seen in my life. I'm kidding, when I grow out my mustache it looks pretty fake too. The next film I want to talk about is another one that's available on Netflix called The Present. It's about a man who is trying to get a present for his wife with his young daughter coming along with him. Let's just say he runs into complications along the way. This is another film that's dealing with a social and political issue, and it deals with it in a really good way. And when you have stories like this, let's just say you end up thinking you know where it's going to go based on other stories like it. But at the very end, this one goes in a direction that subverted my expectations anyway, and I really liked the direction it went in. And the next one we're going to talk about is called Feeling Through, and it's actually available on YouTube in a video from Omeletto with a ridiculously long but very accurate title. It's about a young homeless man who is wandering the city because he is trying to look for a place to stay but just can't find one. And while doing this, he ends up kind of roped into a situation in which he's watching over a deaf and blind man. You got a guy who initially doesn't really care but feels like he just has to do this. But then he has that change of heart that makes him actually really a caring person toward this guy. And I'm not sure if this is actually true, but this has been advertised as the first film to actually star a deaf and blind man in a prominent role. And that's really cool. If you want to see that, check this film out. The next short film on the list is one that I actually did watch as part of that Amazon Prime bundle that I mentioned earlier because I couldn't find it anywhere else for free to watch. But it was worth the price tag. If anything, I probably would have paid the $9.99 alone just to watch this. This film is White Eye. And without going into too much detail, White Eye is about a man who finds his stolen bicycle and tries to get it back. But as he's trying to get it back, let's just say there are consequences. And not the kinds of consequences you would expect, and absolutely not the consequences he expected. And it makes him question his own humanity. And I might be mistaken about this, but I didn't notice any cuts. I think this was a one-take film, and this is like a good 20 minutes. It's all in one take. And it's that, along with the great performances and the gritty realism of what's going on, that adds this really big layer of tension to the movie. Even though it's a story about a guy just trying to get his bike back after it's been stolen. This is a tense movie. Right now, the only way that I know about how to watch this is that you have to buy it as part of this bundle, or whatever other bundles you have. But if this ever comes out on a way to watch it for free or for a lower price, I absolutely recommend checking this one out. It's that good. But my absolute favorite of all the short films in this list, and the one that I think is probably going to be the winner, even though I could be wrong about this, is Two Distant Strangers, a film that's on Netflix that involves a young black cartoonist who ends up in a Groundhog Day-like scenario, but instead of just waking up every day and repeating it over and over again, he's repeating the same deadly altercation with a white police officer over and over and over again. And he desperately tries to find a way out. What I really loved about this movie was not just its scenario or how it's a Groundhog Day-like premise, or how it treats the idea of what it's obviously talking about, police brutality, and how they're targeting black people mostly, and how that's obviously wrong. But what I really liked about it is how much it subverts your expectations of what you're going to watch. You think you have it figured out, and you think you figure out how it's going to go. But then, in the third act, something happens that throws your expectations for a loop. I totally did not intend that pun. That was off the cuff. It's that subversion of expectations and the fantastic performances and the great editing. All of this combines to make just a really terrific short film that I have to absolutely recommend watching. It's on Netflix. It's just around 30 minutes long. Go watch Two Distant Strangers. And last but certainly not least, we move on to the category of Best Documentary Short Subject. And we're going to start with A Love Song for Latasha, which is available to watch on Netflix. And this involves a very sad and anger-inducing story that's told from the point of view of the friends and family of Latasha, who was a young girl who, well, if you don't know the story, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but let's just say something horrible happened to this little girl. This is a very sad short film that makes you want to get up and do something about it. And I really appreciate that about these films, but it's told in a very stylistic way as well. There are a lot of shots that happen just in reverse, and there's a lot where they play around with the film stock and the way the film looks. And overall, I liked how that complemented what they're talking about. I'd recommend checking this one out. The next documentary that we have here is one available on YouTube, and it's called Colette. And Colette involves an old woman and a younger woman going to visit a concentration camp that the older woman had her brother die in during the Holocaust. And what really floored me about this one wasn't necessarily the subject matter of somebody going to visit a concentration camp after they survived the Holocaust, which obviously that's a hard-hitting topic on its own. But what really floored me was that The subject of this documentary is a strong woman who doesn't necessarily want to be the subject of a documentary. You can tell that she doesn't really want to do this, but she feels like she kind of owes it to herself to do it, and that she feels like she needs to do it. This is one that I'm not going to forget anytime soon, and since it's available for free to watch on YouTube, I highly suggest you check it out. And the next one that I want to talk about is also available on YouTube, and it's called A Concerto is a Conversation. Throughout this documentary, we have a young musician who's had tons of struggle in his life, having a conversation with his grandfather, who's also had a ton of struggle in his life. And the conversation they have really is the heart of this film. And I don't want to spoil anything, just go watch this. Another one that I think that everybody needs to watch is another one that's also available on YouTube called Do Not Split. Let's just say that before watching Do Not Split, I thought that I had a decent idea of what was going on in Hong Kong. After I watched Do Not Split, I realized I had no frickin' idea what was going on in Hong Kong. It is insane. I absolutely have to recommend checking that one out. And it came neck and neck with the one that I picked for number one. But my number one just edged it out because it was so tough to watch. My number one pick for this category is Hunger Ward, which I was able to watch on Pluto.tv, which had advertisements, and it was maddening when those advertisements came on because it distracted me from the subject matter of this film. In Yemen, which is where this film was shot, there's an ongoing conflict, and in the midst of this conflict is starvation and how much of an impact it's having on its child population. Let's just say that Hunger Ward I did not enjoy. You're not going to enjoy this film, but it's important to know what's going on. And this film does not hold anything back. There are images in this film that I can guarantee are going to be burned into my mind for the rest of my life. It's something that no matter what side of the conflict you're on, you have to agree that what's happening to these innocent bystanders, children and nurses who are caught in the conflict, it's just deplorable that they have to suffer through this and that nobody's really willing to help them. Because of how frank it is in its depiction, and because it doesn't pull any punches, and because it had that much of an impact on me, I have to say that this is the best of the bunch. Hunger Ward is the best of the documentary branch, and I do think that it has the best chance of winning the Oscar, and it deserves it. Most of these films are actually really accessible, not just in terms of how easy it is to find them and watch them, but a lot of them are actually really damn good. And I'm hoping that I've given you some idea of what to expect if you seek them out and watch them. And that's it for today. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps out with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps people who don't know about my content but would like to see content like this find my channel. And if you're new here and you want to see more of my content, feel free to hit the subscribe button. And if you really want to be notified when I post a new video instead of just finding one randomly every now and then, go ahead and hit the bell icon so you can be notified when I post a new video. And with that, have a good night, and I'll see you later.